So the Life Skills Collaborative, as many of you know, who've been joining us on some of these earlier sessions, is a collaboration of 18 organizations who've come together to champion life skills in India. We've been in operations for about 2 years now, and there's a lot of exciting stuff that we are getting to see different organizations doing, organizations who are part of the Life Skills Collaborative and other organizations who join us through different forums and mediums. The LifeSkillsNet, the session that you have all joined, this is the 4th edition of the LifeSkillsNet. We've run 3 previous sessions. We started in December 2021. This is designed to be a quarterly session. For those of you who are joining for the first time, we do a LSNet session every quarter where we invite people from across the ecosystem who are interested in the life skills space to come in and engage and learn and share. We started in December 2021, where we started talking about the need for a common glossary. We had another session in March 22, which was designed, which spoke about designing and implementing assessments for life skills. The session in July 2022 spoke about the importance of the voice of the community. The session here today, as you're aware, is trying to catalyze life skills through government action and government engagement. Just a couple of points that I want to share before I introduce the panel that we have. This is a webinar. This is also being telecast live on LinkedIn. We are recording this session. We will make it available to the ecosystem through the LinkedIn Live video and through a YouTube channel. If you have questions, I'll request you to post your questions on chat. We will take up all the questions at the end. We will first allow the conversation to happen between our panelists. Primarily, basically, that's kind of all I wanted to say in terms of tools like apply. One other thing that will be really helpful is if you can add the name of your organization in front of your name so that we can know who you are and we can also know which organization you're part of. Okay, all right. Then very quickly, I want to introduce a very special panel that we have today. Moderating the session today, we have Samar. Samar Bajaj is part of the India programs team and leads projects across education and livelihoods. She spent 10 years as a consultant with the Boston Consulting Group and with E&Y, Ernst & Young, and has worked multiple sectors, which include media, consumer, FMCG, and retail. She studied economics at LSR and holds a dual master's degree in public administration from the London School of Economics and Sciences, PO Paris. Samar is currently with the Michael and Susan Dell Foundation, which is dedicated to improving lives of children living in urban poverty, with offices in Austin and Delhi. They also have offices in South Africa. The Dell Family Foundation is funding programs that foster high-quality public education and child health and improve economic stability of families living in poverty. Samar, thank you so much for agreeing to moderate this session. We are extremely privileged and happy to have you with us. From the Magic Bus team, we've got Dhanashri Brahme. Dhanashri is the Chief of Programs at Magic Bus India Foundation. She comes with over 25 years of experience in the development sector. And she's worked in many areas across health, microfinance, adolescent empowerment. She's worked with the government and UN alike. She's got a social work degree from TIS Mumbai. Magic Bus, which is a part of the LSC collaboration, works with children and young people across India, taking them on a journey from childhood to livelihood and out of poverty. In the current year, they have over 400,000 children who are on this journey across 22 states and 18 districts. Dhanashri, thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you.
Also joining us today is Jaya, who's the co-founder and director of the Peter Mill Foundation for Educational Leadership. Monal is an education leadership expert, teacher leadership, school leadership, teacher educator, assessment developer, 21st century learning expert, art educationist, and curriculum developer. The Kevali Education Foundation envisions creating public system change by fostering competent and passionate leaders who have the foresight and courage to create large-scale sustainable impact at the grassroots level. Monal, thank you so much for joining us. I do appreciate your time and your guidance that you have been sharing with us. And finally, the fourth member on the panel today is Dr. Saktibrata Sen, who's the Director of Programs from Room to Read, India. He leads the literacy and girls education programs. He specializes in designing programs that are about quality at scale. He's well recognized for his work in Indian scripts and languages, and he's passionate about bringing children's literature into classroom and loves working with the young adult population. Room to Read, which was founded in the year 2000, believes that the world change starts with educated children. They are creating a world free from illiteracy and gender inequality. They're achieving this goal by helping children in historically low-income communities develop literacy skills and habits of reading. More than 32 million children have benefited from their programs. Room to Read has worked in 21 countries in more than 49,000 communities. And they provide additional support through remote solutions that facilitate learning beyond the classrooms and aim to benefit 40 million children by 2025. Dr. Sen, welcome and thank you for making time to joining us. I'm going to hand this over to the panel now. I'm not going to take too much time, but I do want to say that the Life Skills Collaborative has been championing life skills in India now for almost 2 years. We've got partnerships in 4 different states. We are working closely with the states of Maharashtra, Uttarakhand, Mizoram, and Rajasthan. There's a lot of learning that has come to us through this process, and the representatives that you see here bring in that expertise, that learning, in addition to their work experience beyond what they've been doing with the LSE. With that, Samar, I'm going to hand it to you. Thank you very much, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Arjun, for the kind introduction. I'm very excited. Good afternoon, everyone. Excited to be here with all of you today and to be having what I hope is the, one among many conversations around how we take life skills and, don't really think of them as something which is sprinkled on top, but really something which is very core to the way that, to all our definitions of education and how, what young people actually experience in school. So I think I'm going to use today's discussion is a lot about how do we strengthen government engagement and implementation of government-led programs in life skills. And the jumping off point that I will really use is, we talk a lot about, okay, now the NEP talks about life skills and suddenly, life skills in India will happen. So I'll probably just use some reflections on, what the NEP says about life skills and what it doesn't say. I was looking through the document actually just a few minutes before the panel started. And, to be honest, I didn't think that there was anything very different about life skills that was said in the NEP. It's not very different from, what all of us would have as an intuitive understanding of what a good quality education means. Something which is relevant for today's young people, something that will be relevant for them when, they go out into the world of work. And I think when the NEP talks about life skills, it uses in context with many of the other pillars that they have, which is, the different stages have been recast. There is a focus on early childhood education and foundational literacy and numeracy. They talk a lot about how education must now be holistic and it must now be experiential. But I don't think it's very different from what education was always, outlined to be from the beginning. So I think to just take a controversial stand somewhat, I don't think it's very new or very unexpected. It's good that the NEP says it because now, we have the weight of the policy behind. But I think where a lot of work still needs to be done is how this will become a reality. So yes, it's important and yes, it needs to be done, but how will it become a reality? And that's really where I think, my fellow panelists and I would like to focus the discussion on today. So 2-3 things that I feel, the NEP doesn't fully lay, really detail out, and it's a policy document. It's intended to be interpreted by states and, there will be many other documents that will come. But I think more clearly, which skills at which stage need to be focused on has somewhere been now put under the mandate of the new NCF, and clarity on how holistic and experiential learning will really start to get implemented, what will be the specific components of it, is likely something that will only emerge once the NCF is clear. Then I think, there is also this big question that this is not like a bunch of words, right? It's a very deep mindset shift from moving from a very, I would say a rote-based learning to first a competency-based learning. And now saying that from competency-based, we want to move it to being more holistic, more experiential, and more relevant for the 21st century. So there are two levels of changes that we need to make. Like one is, there need to be changes in the classroom and how children actually will in some way get imparted this new form of education, but it's also very fundamental mindset shift for every stakeholder in the ecosystem, whether they're a bureaucrat, whether they're a teacher, whether they're a block officer, whether they're a nonprofit that is actually working with children directly. And, equally so for like many other stakeholders in the ecosystem, including parents. What does this really mean? How do I interpret my child's report card? So on and so forth. So when we think about like where the, from the NEP to actually more this vision becoming a reality, I think there are many more building blocks that will need to come in. I'll lay out a few which I think are important from my perspective. And then I would love for my fellow panelists to maybe comment a little bit on how they're incorporating this or what elements of this they're seeing in their work already, and where do they feel, there is an opportunity for all of us to come together as an ecosystem and, strengthen these specific areas. So I think to be able to implement like holistic experiential learning in its true sense, we need to be clear on, what's that framework, like what are the things that we are trying to impart. That then needs to be in some way very specifically translated into curriculum, which would be lesson plans, textbooks, the class activities. So there need to be a lot of tools that can then be used by educators. And then I think to really close it to get, like to bring it all together, we would need to have a few ways of assessing students to really understand what is working, what's not. And when I talk about these three things, framework, curriculum, and assessments, it's not in a way to say that, the same framework, the same activities, and the same way of assessing, really needs to be applied in a very standard cookie cutter approach across all student populations. But there needs to be some level of harmony, some consistency as we think about it, so that, there is a common framework around which different actors in the ecosystem can align. We can get a sense of what is working in some geographies versus not. So I would look at these as more overarching principles, but then deeply contextualized to, different student populations that we are serving. And then, comes the implementation of this, like who's going to do what, like when is it going to be done? Where is it going to be done? Is it going to be in the school, outside the school? How much will teachers do? How much will the community do? What will be the role of parents? What will be the role of school leaders? How does governance, monitoring, all of these, big words that we know when it comes to, large scale change and sort of the systems thinking, how do they all really fit in and, gear up towards, I would say, making that vision which has been laid out in the NEP very simply and succinctly a reality. So that's what we want to spend time on. What I'm going to maybe just get started with is that I'll, just go one, like to each of the panelists in turn. If you could briefly just touch on where, what is the area of work that your organization is currently focused on when it comes to life skills implementation and, mostly in a more government context. And then what do you think are some of the challenges, or where do you see the gap between the NEP and implementation? So you could just highlight a couple of points from your side. So we'll start with Dhanashree, you first, then I'll go to Monal and come to Dr. Sen, and then, we will take it there. So just a brief introduction of your work, and then, what are the areas that you feel require the most amount of work?
Sure. Thank you, Samar, for setting the tone. I think it was very useful to sort of have the conversation within those three pillars that you highlighted. So I think to start with, Magic Bus is, of course, working with more than 400,000 adolescents right now. But in terms of state government engagement, while we are in conversation with, let's say, approximately 10 state governments, we have a partnership, like a clear partnership with 3 state governments, Mizoram, Maharashtra, and Rajasthan. And what that also tells us is, like you were rightly saying, that this is not one size fit all. This is really not a cookie cutter approach, but all of these state governments, as we speak, are already looking at a whole lot of different entry points, different engagement models, and also where they are at currently in their life skills journey. I mean, clearly, national education policy sort of helped to categorically highlight it or use the term life skills so specifically, or, write down terms such as teamwork, cooperation, resilience, which were not mentioned so clearly previously in the policy documents. So clearly that policy push is helpful in driving those conversations because it provides the tailwinds, it gives you a foothold for a conversation. So that's extremely valuable. And against that, or like against that backdrop where you're assessing, is where that state government is at right now in its journey. And within that, I think even in the context of Life Skills Collaborative, all of us who have engaged with 4 different state governments have definitely tried to see where is it that the state government is now calibrating its own model vis-a-vis life skills. Some of them had done something in the textbooks and they wanted to take that forward. Others were more, let's say, in the school health program domain inside of RKSK, they wanted to take that forward. A few others were looking at new age skills, digital, employability, work readiness, and quite a few others were also talking about English language skills because that was a priority for that state government. So really, when all of us as collaborators who work together on life skills started this journey, I'm sure we were faced with this whole lot of diverse conversations to say, in this, let's try to look at life skills. So honestly, it has been, let's say, a humbling experience, but I think it's expected a lot out of us to be able to respond to a varying range of things on that life skills canvas. And I wouldn't say that life skills was automatically always the first thing that a government counterpart spoke about, but they clearly got to it eventually. And I think that's the shift, perhaps, if I may use the term, that's the shift that perhaps the policy has been able to drive, that no longer is anyone saying, oh, it's not important. So even if CBSE trying to do a holistic report card, I think it's a big shift. The fact that nobody in a state government conversations now is saying that life skills we'll talk about later. Instead, the conversation is more about, we have some contextual priorities. We have dropouts here. We have enrollment challenges there. Here, we don't get enough girls. Here, I think we need to look at teacher capacities. In another place, we're talking about how do we dovetail life skills capacities with teacher capacities. So really, I think this is where I find the excitement, that it's tending to stay within the system. And we are already talking about a system that's becoming much more responsive to having a more engaged conversations on life skills. And that's also then bringing us to the point saying, is it statewide? Are we ready? Because like you were mentioning, unless a whole lot of children are getting exposed to life skills in one form or the other, we may not reach a point where we are saying, let's do assessments at scale. Because unlike NAS, which is to figure out where children are on literacy, numeracy, academics, etc., there has to be that extent of exposure to life skills to come to a point where you'd say, okay, now let's assess to what extent children at scale are equipped with life skills. So I think we are somewhere in between right now on that journey.
That's great, Dhanashree, and thanks for sharing. I think very so very clearly the different entry points and different ways that states are thinking about it. Monal, if I could just come to you and again just talk a little bit about the work that Piramal has been doing in this space, and I would love to get a little bit of your insight on like how you're making that mindset shift happen, and how you're sort of like covertly pushing the agenda also forward.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I just have a little lag. So, actually, quite my response is in a way quite similar to what Dhanashri was also talking about in terms of, what are the spaces and where are we in the country. Uh, uh, at the organization, at the foundation, what we've been doing is, I mean, life skills has been, and social emotional learning has been very, very critical component of what we believe is useful for children to learn. And almost like, almost slightly more than a academic subject to be learned. It's almost that way. I think so. From that context, if you look at what we've been doing, we have been, working with NCRT to see how you can integrate it. The school health and wellness program that Dhanashri was mentioning, how we can integrate social emotional learning into that. And in the various states that we are working with, Rajasthan and Orissa and Jharkhand and some other states, how we can integrate, anything to do with well-being, mental health, life skills, social emotional learning, whatever way that the state is responding to it with. And how can we integrate it into their curriculum, their teacher development, their assessment redesign, all of it. And I think I'll just also very quickly bring in here the angle of system change that we keep talking about. For us, I think what we learned over the years was that anything that you want to do, uh, you know, for example, NCF 2005 was already talking about some of very, interesting changes that education needed to have, and now NEP talks about. I think what we've learned is that the lack is because how does the policy get converted into actual action on the ground via the state agencies and via the district agencies. So I think that's been our space. How do we kind of initiate their action? How do we, rechannelize their action to what is the most critical to be done? And I just want to very quickly give an example. For life skills, for example, the NEP, like you mentioned, NEP 2020 speaks about it. And there is actually a task list that was created from the MOE. Now, what we learned was that most states have the task list, but do not have the know-how of how do we get into, achieving these task lists. So we literally actually, our teams actually sat with the government officials and read through that, and for each of the task items, kind of made a plan as to how this can be achieved, either via the state officials or via the district officials and stuff like that. And one more thing I wanted to share was that, again, there is a lot of fund that comes from the center to the state. And the states, most of the states are supposed to, create a central budget and create the state budget and send it to the center. Can life skills or can any of these innovations become part of that, budget list? Very consciously, can we work with the state officials and district officials to create that? So I think a lot of all of that we've been involved in. And the last thing, what you mentioned, which the mindset part, this is a huge narrative shift, right? I mean, for almost 70 years, we've been talking only about, academic subjects. And a lot of mainstream still talks about, a parent getting really worried about maths mein acha marks aaya ki nahi. Not really worried about, is my child growing up in the fullest way. So I think that narrative shift, how do you consciously work with the state government officials? How do you build people inside the state government to and the district governments to kind of start championing these thoughts? And so really in Rajasthan, if I take this example, what we've been doing with the life skills collaborative work is to actually create these 20-30 champions who are now in their language, they are called as master facilitators in the government's language, but really what they are is champions of these thoughts. So, yeah.
Got it. Thanks, Monal, and I'll come back to the champions point in a bit. Dr. Sen, if we could come to you. So, just talk us through again a little bit about your work engaging with different states. And then what I wanted you to touch on is, anytime you're working with the government, there are always different levels of readiness, as Dhanashi said, and many different perspectives also. So, where do you see, or what are some of the opportunities for people to align or come together also on a common platform?
Thank you, Sama. Thank you for having me here. First is that I am not a doctor. I am rather with a doctor at this particular point. So, there could be, there's just going to be a 2-minute, lapse whenever I'm speaking. So, other than that, I have come out of the chamber just to do this webinar. So yes, thank you. Room to Read, is an organization which strongly believes in the fact that the knowledge that we want to bring to the government, or the knowledge that we want to share with the government, strengthen the government with, is actually a knowledge of the praxis. It has to be built from the work that we are doing with the child in the classroom, where we are actually sitting with the child and trying to help her grow, whether that's literacy or whether that's life skills or whatever we are doing. So our knowledge that we want to co-create along with the government is always very, very practice-based. And from there, we probably get into concentric circles where we also get into serious advocacy for system strengthening, researches, and many other things. And we just want to target, we just want to make sure that we have touched upon the entire ecosystem, as many folks possible. Let's just put them all together. Let's touch everything. But at the same time, the main thread that binds us together, or our main DNA, is that it is knowledge based out of practice. So we have a demonstration model, and we have what we call, an I do model and a we do model. So an I do model where we are actually demonstrating a classroom or a program with the government, where we are probably, when it comes to life skills, we are taking girls at the young age of standard 6 and following that cohort up till standard 12. And there is systematized, scientifically paced out a life skills curriculum, which traverses in trajectory which is aligned to their age, which is aligned to a larger sense of well-being and a larger sense of fulfillment to be able to make a decision. And while, so this is an I do model, but then it's also about a we do model, where we are probably with lesser resources, we are trying to work with the government and trying to bring in some aspects of that fuller curriculum that we have as an explicit life skill instruction model into the government system, training wardens if we are working with KGVBs, working with teachers if you're working with the school system, although we work only with the girls as of now. Probably we are, internally we are also discussing whether we, if we are looking at the entire ecosystem, probably we also need to work with boys someday. So given, you know, there is this engagement, there is this debate, there's this reflection, and there's this sharing. I think this is a mainstay of our work that we do in various of our states. You know, when it was 2019, probably, I think in one of those internal reflection sessions, we actually figured out that there is probably no consensus about what do we as a country understand by life skills. And, you know, I mean, as a country, we are destined to handle diversity, and diversity not only in political thought, or diversity in lived realities, or diversity in ethnicities, or languages, diversities even in academic approaches to life skills. And if I could lament a bit, not all perspectives that were being discussed, among all those diverse perspectives, not all were academically very, very informed. So there could be somebody who would come up and say that, you know, aap ladkiyon ko dressing sense sikha dijiye, that's life skills. Or, you know, they need to be hygienic. Statements as patronizing as those. Or thoda sa wo sikha dijiye aap log, what do they call it? Work education. थोड़ा सा skills, कुछ हाथ में कुछ सीख लें जो खुद कर पाए, तो फ्री टाइम में रहेगी क्या? This was also a perspective that you had to deal with. You were not only dealing with which framework to follow, whether we follow the SEL framework, or whether we follow the 21st century framework, whether we follow a framework for employability. So there was once one kind of a struggle where you were trying to find out a consensus where the various frameworks are actually academically informed. And at the same time, you also have perspectives which are not so academically informed, and which are also coming from certain lived realities and certain perceptions which should be questioned. And that was probably creating the biggest disjuncture, I would say, in creating a narrative of life skills where everybody should be aligning to. This was, I mean, I'm sure this is still there, but with the coming in of the life skills collaboration, I think we have achieved quite a bit in that direction. That we have been able to actually put forward a narrative where many people have agreed to a framework which could be very similar to mine, which is also yours, and we have collaborated to create an expanded version of what you and I both agree. And at the same time, probably when we're working with the government, we've also learned that we'll also probably have to not only help them understand what it is all about, but you will also probably have to say yes to many things that they understand or they perceive as needs. But then at the same time, the quality control is something which the LifeSkillsNet has done quite well. So yes, there are different life skill programs in different states in different names. So you may call it an entrepreneurship curriculum. You may call it a happiness curriculum. You may call it a socio-emotional learning. You may call it something to do with self-awareness. You may call it employability. But somewhere they all are now with the NEP in the horizon. They're all talking about the self, the social self, the awareness, the idea of making informed choices, interdependence, co-creation of a lived reality that is suitable for everybody's agency, and it is something where everybody needs to contribute, and it is not only, I mean, the onus is not only on the girl child. I think this is where we are moving forward to, and this is a good step. I mean, just to add one little more point, is that when when we as partners, we were working in Uttarakhand, we have found that there were different units of, even in the SCRT, that were having these programs which now we can loosely call as life skill programs. Now the dialogue between them was also absent, and now this this collaboration has helped them to reflect into their own program of life skills and picking up common threads. The LSC task committee worked on different policy documents available globally also. And at the national level, they wanted to bring it in such a contextualized manner that anybody in the government who is a decision maker can actually understand and engage with it. So these are very critical steps. So, I mean, what I mean to say is to have an academic framework and to be able to say that we'll all align to it is probably easier. But when that needs to be actionable, then that needs a much larger and deeper commitment. The LSC-Net and all its partners have really shown that commitment for the last 2 years. I think this is a major, headway in this domain. Over to you.
Thank you, Shakti Brata. No Dr. Sen this time. So first, I think I just wanted to, you really nicely brought out the fact that, like, as you're aligning on frameworks, everybody will come with their approach, and how this group, and I think that's been also my experience and many others, is that, like, really saying, okay, this is the only framework actually is sometimes not useful. So coming up with something which is, I think, 70-80%, like there's a broad overlap, there's an alignment in principle, I think is good enough, versus trying to think of, okay, like this is the framework that all of India and every child will follow. I did want to pick up a little bit on, like when you talk about moving from the framework to the implementation, and my next follow-up question to you was really addressed on that. Is the manifestation of that framework, you gave some examples, right? Like, there's an entrepreneurship mindset, which is happening in Delhi, mostly for high school, like grade 9 and up. Delhi had also experimented with the happiness curriculum, which was one class, I think a week, or one class a day, where, teachers and students were doing different set of activities, which was different from what they were studying in their subject related periods. Other states have said, okay, we want to focus on spoken English. Some states have had a strong gender lens. Some states have also just said, okay, like no bag Saturdays, and that's life skills for us, right? So how do you really and given that a lot of your work has been rooted much more on classroom practice, what are the 3-4, I would say, and that's why I would say, there's not going to be the one. I think it's there's going to be a long time till we really sort of converge. But what are the, I would say, 3-4 powerful ways of imparting these skills that you are seeing, either directly in your own work or more broadly in the ecosystem, which could be interesting for states to look at as they embark on their own life skills journey?
Sorry, I was muted. Probably to answer this, I would need to think a little more, but let me still just think aloud a bit on whatever you've asked. I think one of the most important things that you need to take onto scale is a programmatic component that is, pardon my statement, easy to look. It may not be an easy thing in its actual essence. It can be a very, very deep, rigorous construct that it has been, has been created through many people's experiences and many people's participations, contributions, but it has to look simple. Because if it doesn't look simple, you will not be able to take it to scale. If you really want to travel far, please travel light. But at the same time, the struggle is when you really need to save yourself or save the message, the program, whatever you want to take onto scale, from oversimplification or reductionism. So while it is simple to look at, it always should come as a package where you are having people to get trained to be able to handle it, so that it doesn't really, just because it looks simple, it should not, people should feel motivated to do it, but at the same time, they should also know that I need some handholding to be able to do it. So let's do it together. So the togetherness, so that the state's ownership or the government system's ownership is there, is probably the second point. The third very, very important thing is a constant dialogue with the system. And that constant dialogue could be anything depending on what are you doing. So it's not only about monthly meetings or meeting a certain cadre of monitors or somewhat like that. It could also be about joint visits that we do, see the reality together. And number 4 is probably have an assessment. I mean, we all know that the LSC system, NLC-NET has worked on a wonderful system of assessment. And one of the major discussions about alignment was on to have a life skill tools, because, academic frameworks are fine, but at the same time, when it comes to assessing something that needs to be done, as Dhanashri was saying, that, children need exposure to be able to say that they will be assessed one day. And that needs actionables. Simple things that have been done over a period of time, and the experience have been gathered in the government system, and you have been a partner facilitating that. So have a look at the reality together. That's my next point. So these are the 3-4 points that we always believe in any scaling up.
Got it.
Over to you.
Thank you. And I think there's a good set of principles there in terms of when we design programmatically, like it needs to be simple, but it needs to then at least have the adequate depth and make sure that there is a role for everybody to play. So thank you for sharing that. You didn't give me a direct answer on what programs could be used, but I'll try and see if we can tease that out from some of our other panelists. Monal,
Sure.
if I could just come back to you, and I wanted to, just talk a little bit about that example that you gave of taking those 20-25 people in Rajasthan and really, changing the narrative, really bringing about that mindset shift for them, that they are the champions. Just talk us through, how hard was the journey? What are some of the, because I guess this is the journey that we really have to traverse, right? In bits and parts, with first a set of champions, then in a almost cascaded way with every single actor which is there in the system.
Absolutely.
So just, examples and any specific experience that you had on what are the likely different perspectives that we have to come across, and then how do we harmonize those?
I saw this exercise from a distance.
Sorry, Shaktipata, I was requesting Monal if she could answer.
Oh, sorry.
No worries.
Yeah, thanks. Samar, like you said, we say that it is 20-25 people who are now the champions, but the journey has been a tough one. And I also want to share the journey in context of what, once again, what we have learned over the years, how, innovations can be kind of embedded into a larger government context. So I think I'll keep doing that all the time. I think for us, pardon me, I'm going to use a non-education and more HR type of word here. I think the key for us was recruiting the right people for the right job. And I don't mean recruiting from outside, but recruiting from within. So we actually went through a a huge exercise of, who are those people who can, we sent out a Google form, people applied, people from the government applied for it, and 130 people applied, and then basis several criterias in terms of, whether they are really the subject matter experts in life skills, whether they are really the subject matter experts in assessments, whether they represent a variety of perspectives, the diversity that Shakti was talking about, whether they represent that, and whether they also represent a know-how of the diversity that a large state like Rajasthan itself has, right? Because Rajasthan has tribal areas and urban area, rural area, semi-urban, semi-rural, whole lot of all of that. There is hilly, there is desert, there is all of that also. And also culturally, Rajasthan is, I mean, though it is similar, but still it is different. Languages are different. So, I mean, the dialects are different. So I think for us, it was also about whether these 2025 represent the variety of zones. There are 9 zones, and we at least got people from 5 zones into our group, the first group. So whether these people are from these zones and they deeply understand those geographical contexts, because what we realized was that geographical context is then going to, kind of impact what the children understand or do not understand. And a very simple example I will give is, there was a question in one of the assessments which used the word budget, and one group of people said that hamare bacche ye samajh jayenge, people from Jaipur. But some other group, I think, I can't remember from where they were, but the other group, they were from rural context. They said budget jaisa word hamare bacche samajh hi nahi payenge. So how do you then, bring both these perspectives together and, find an alternative to, acha, it's not just ki dusra word use kar lo, but it's about, understanding these two contexts, figuring out whether really this will work or not, and then finding solutions. And then, while finding solutions, actually building a common understanding of something like life skills, or something like, life skills assessments. So I think that was a huge context for us. The like I said, recruiting the right people for right job. The other is, constant, what we typically call as workshopping. But really, I mean, workshop not in just in terms of, imparting a knowledge base, but workshopping for building their understanding itself, and building their depth in what is going on. And I'll give you again an example, both from a program in social emotional learning that we do and from LSC. We have observed, we have learned that when you talk about something like mathematics, there is a method to teaching mathematics to students. So the teacher has to be, parangat in the method, and therefore the workshopping by any expert has to be a lot about that applied method. In this case, whether it is social emotional learning or life skills assessments, whatever it is, there is an X amount of internalization of the concepts because these are not concepts in terms of like in mathematics, but concepts in terms of life itself. So I mean, one can't just train an expert, train a teacher in, say, this is how you will teach emotional resilience, for example, or this is how you will assess emotional resilience. One has to ensure that the person who is part of your group actually internalizes the concept itself of emotional resilience, and it becomes part of her reflection process. I think that is something that we learned again over the years. So I mean, so when I'm saying workshopping with them, I'm talking about how concepts can be internalized, and therefore the champions being created. So yeah, these two things primarily.
Got it. Thanks, Monal. I guess eventually we all understand that the path to scale is, in some way the government adopts it, it gets integrated in the curriculum, teachers have internalized the concepts, and they are also equipped with, I would say, the tools and the methodologies to impart these skills in the classroom. So, they understand the value of it, but they can also then practice it and teach it. Dhanashri, I wanted to come to you to just talk us through what are some of the ingredients that will actually make this happen at a, almost at a full state or a system or a district level. And I maybe just 2-3 prompts. And if you could touch on these points and any additional in your mind, it would be great. Like one, I think the value of the relationship at the top level, right? Who's the champion? Who's this person who's really pushing it through? And then you all have been running direct programs of your own. So there is a huge role that there is on ground community, volunteers, parents, there are many other actors for this to really be a success beyond what is going to happen in the classroom. So would just love to get your perspectives on this piece.
Sure. Thank you. And I think, yeah, that's very well put, because it's not about just having an MOU in place or, starting with that document right at the top. There is also a lot that's happening on the ground, and how these two processes need to come together or get dovetailed for some magic to actually happen as far as the partnership or work on life skills is concerned. So I think a couple of examples on this front. Yes, clearly, I mean, the buy-in at the state level is very, very helpful. But if you've demonstrated something already, even if it is not at scale, but it provides the proof of concept, it provides evidence to somehow say, and I think practically one has to also look at it, how that evidence points to the having fulfilled some need within the system itself. So for example, if it was about attendance or regularity, what is the kind of work or the program that you've run on the ground, brought children back to school, or have them retained, or have them, progress through grades because they are more motivated, they have greater levels of aspiration, or they're more engaged, or their ability to problem solve is much better. So, how is that connect seeing with their current priorities before they start valuing life skills itself inherently as being valuable? So I think some of that demonstration being there on the ground has been helpful, even if we were running some directly implemented programs in place. So yes, so evidence, proof of concept, both very important ingredients, I would say. And the second most important thing is recognizing the system's own challenges and ensuring that the response or the intervention model that one is talking about is speaking to those challenges. I mean, it can't be outside of those. So if teacher vacancies exist, then they are there. So I cannot say that if the school is run by 2 teachers, then both of them will get nominated for a life skills training program. It will not happen. So we will have to really identify to work within the system's own challenges. So what system-led actually means is going beyond the bind to find out which are those challenges of the system which are going to drive the manner in which the intervention is conceptualized, delivered, as well as the ownership sort of passed on, transferred to the government itself. I think one quick example here is also to start looking at what are the opportunities as well as the constraints that teachers are facing right now. An opportunity is clearly that they have an audience with students. An opportunity is also because in the context of NEP, but also some of the states that have done preparatory work on the state curriculum framework, which they had to submit for the NCF, that already started to think, how do we put life skills within the textbooks? So how do we start looking at these opportunities and obviously recognize the challenges that the teachers are always going to have the time constraint on how much they're going to do. We all know that. And so therefore, is there in our designing and modeling different alternatives as far as the teacher is concerned to deliver life skills? Does it have to be an exclusive session? Is it integrated with something that's in the textbook? Can it be alongside something that the government or that particular state government's own curriculum is sort of proposing right now? So for example, Maharashtra looks at life skills in the context of art appreciation and self-awareness. That's a textbook for class 9. For Mizoram, we have been fairly fortunate to see life skills very well reflected in their social science textbook. So we are looking for those kinds of footholds, frankly, whereby even if a dedicated session does or does not happen, that opportunity for what's in the textbook is not lost. So how do you put into it things like a facilitation guide developed, whereby teachers know that it's in the textbook, but I don't know how to teach it. I don't know how to teach it beyond how I know how to teach history or geography or science. And that's not how life skills will get delivered. So you'll have to add that other element to it. So I think recognizing the challenges as well as the opportunities almost in the same breath and designing the interventions in that light. The third thing I think, which is very important and probably both Shaktiprata and Monal touched upon it, is ownership beyond the MOU is also about commitments. And therefore, if one gets a foothold or if there is a commitment, even as a part of their NEP commitments under innovation in their annual work plan, it really helps. So that's another thing which has been one of our learnings, where it has been possible for us to put in at least the state of Mizoram in the annual work plan under innovations, a clear reference to assessments, clear reference to monitoring, clear reference to scaling life skills. And even if in terms of the resources put there is small, large, or whatever they may be, it signifies a commitment and one can ride on that for annual resources to be allocated. And finally, I think what Life Skills Collaborative did is by going through this process of building a glossary, systematizing or standardizing things like definitions. What we did is we exposed various actors in the state government to that definition process. And through the definition process, I think what they were asking themselves is, okay, in our context, how do we define it? And that was the best way to get engagement, I would say. Similarly with tools, the moment they had to contextualize the assessment tools to say whether this question in the tool will work or not work, you had to actually apply your mind to thinking, what would a child understand? And I think these processes of exposure has also made them rethink their own approach to life skills and then start systematizing the assessment processes, because you're constantly asking the question, how would you take it forward? We are only piloting it right now. So that's where the journey of, okay, I need a facilitation guide, or what's written in my HCF, my state curriculum framework, what am I giving as a part of NCF as far as life skills is concerned? Am I going to stick to the 10 WHO skills because that is the best place where the school health program is aligned, or I'm open to look at 5 more skills or 4 more competencies? So I think those conversations got opened up with what we did through the glossary and both the pilots as well, because the tools and system engagement, where the system itself had to come back with some of its own thoughts on how do they see life skills, what the future needs are, I think has been helpful. And needless to say, there is certain level of readiness, definitely, given the world we live in, for aspects such as employability or readiness, or for aspects such as well-being. And within well-being, let's say a state like Mizoram is going to talk about things like substance abuse, for example, while some other state might talk about sexual reproductive health, and a third state may talk about teenage pregnancies. But I think that is the context in which we operate, and it's great to be able to appreciate it in that light.
Got it. Thanks for sharing that. And maybe I will just do one wrap-up question with each of the panelists. So I'll go back in reverse order, Dhanashree, starting with you first. Like, what are the two, big action steps, or what are the two big areas of work that you're seeing now? Specifically, if we talk about your engagement with Mizoram as part of LSC, where we piloted the tool, we now have the results. Like, where are you seeing maximum interest from the state in terms of taking the conversation more broadly on life skills forward?
Yeah, no, you're right. I think there is great openness, because, it's like if you've tested and collected data for 10,000 or children, then there is firstly excitement to know what came out of it. But I think through that, what is being recognized, that we have a textbook in place, we have put in some great content, but we have no sense of how it is being utilized. So now the next steps for us is to resurrect the conversation within the government. And what we're doing is training the teachers in the light, social science teachers, in the light of the textbook that they're using. So that's a very practical next step for us, because whatever the SCRT wants to put in the curriculum, it's going to take it forward from the textbooks that they have right now. That's one point. The second is that because we've been able to get a budget commitment under the annual work plan, therefore the direction in which we are facilitating change is to see how they want to look at assessments and monitoring at an overarching level. So not just for life skills. And within that, where is it that they'd like to start looking at life skills assessments, whether this tool or some other tool? So quite frankly, if the state of Mizoram looks at two pathways to deliver life skills, one is in the context of the social science textbooks. The second is in the context of more teacher capacities in general, or the work that they are wanting to do with the BRCs and CRCs or the resource persons. And a clear recognition of the fact that some of the PRC, CRCs have remained more administrative and have not played the facilitation role. So really openly recognizing that we need to invest in facilitation skills of the RPs with the Cluster Resource Center, and then move a step forward to see how they can start delivering life skills. So for us, it's the budget commitment that exists vis-a-vis how can we work with the government on teacher capacities, but also make most of what's also in the social science textbook. So the scale up or scaling, whether it's of life skills itself or of the assessment, will be determined by these two pathways. So those are the opportunities in front of us.
Thanks so much, Dhanashree. Monal, so just, your experience of having piloted the tool in Rajasthan, now we are at that stage where we're going to be sharing some of this back with the respective stakeholders. So what are the areas that you feel Rajasthan is most interested in, or, the big opportunities that are emerging from there?
Yeah, thanks. So again, I want to kind of put this in context of how the overall system is changing, right? And I think under the NEP, first of all, there is a recognition for assessments and evaluation itself to change, right? There is a revamping, there is a complete change that is in order. And the ministry and the NCRT is pushing for what they are calling as Parakh and all of that. So I think it is in that context that I want to first of all see what lies ahead. The other is that a few states like Tamil Nadu and Rajasthan and probably some more have already started recognizing what needs to be done, and therefore looking at how new assessment cells can be actually created within their SCRTs. And this is a completely new thing, new phenomena, because इस तरह का कोई डिपार्टमेंट या इस तरह का कोई टेबल भी अभी तक एग्जिस्ट नहीं करता था, राइट, इन विद इन द SCRT this thing. So again, I want to look at it from that context, and I think within that again, so set up the assessment cell. At least what we're doing with Rajasthan, for example, we've set up the assessment cell. We are also setting up mini cells at the diets in the districts, yeah, and creating a kind of a workflow between these units. The other thing that we're doing is to work with the government to look at how actually assessments will itself change. So how, is it your board that needs to change? Is it your large scale? Because especially in Rajasthan, there used to be some large scale assessments that the state itself used to run, just like there is NAS at the central level. So do you change that? How do you change that? What do you change in that? How much do you integrate? Is it only like 2 questions from life skills that you integrate into 10 questions of academics, or is it something else that you do? So I think those are the angles and those are the engagements at the moment, and that's where I kind of see what we're doing in Life Skills Collaborative is going to be very, very valuable, because here is where we've already created a fantastic glossary, which is like, for the first time, probably an Indian context wala glossary we have, right? Which truly speaks for Indian thing of life skills, right? And the other assessment tools, the well-being tool and the future ready tool and the teacher readiness tool and whole lot of that. So I think that whole gamut of work is going to be, very useful in the way the conversations on assessment cell and what do you do with assessment cells. That is, I mean, that's the angle which I want to bring in. The last thing is, I was talking about, building those 20-25 resource people. And this is how I kind of see the entire, thing culminating, that if we have the resources and if we have the champions in diet and in the districts, then these are the champions that are going to take forward not only what life skills assessments should be like, but also what a complete revamping in assessments need to be. So I think that's how I am seeing.
Got it. No, and I think very interesting for the state to be thinking about very holistically revamping assessments and, looking at bringing both the academic and the life skills together. Shaktipata, I'll come to you, and maybe just what are the big opportunities emerging from your experience in working with Uttarakhand, the top 2, and then we'll hand it over to the Satva team to give us some questions from the audience.
Thank you. You know what? Let me start with one set of anecdotes. I'll just give you the common narrative of all of those anecdotes. When the Room to Read team and the SCRT members and some diet members were actually trying to pilot test it in 3 districts, they were Pauri, they were Almora and Dehradun. I think my team used to tell me that the first major discussion that used to happen inside the government system, like with the SCRT members or the diet members, is the acceptance of the fact that gender equality is not just something which is to be remaining on paper or in some policy of the government or in some, some Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao sort of a thing, or the NEP document per se. It has to be there in the first acknowledgement of the fact that that gender equality is not only about about agency for girls, it is about an ecosystem for the agency. So there were many stories. I probably do not remember all of them, that they were discussing, that the government people were discussing while they were engaged in assessment. There was a self-reflection and there were changes in their perceptions on gender equality. This for me is very important, and this for me, I would like to put this forward as a major learning. Whenever we are engaging with the government, it's good to go forward with a message or a document or a testing tool or whichever, or a program. But until and unless you can have the government actually doing something with you on the ground, you will never be able to drive in the basic message that you want to put forward. The biggest opportunities are at this particular point, as I would say, as Room to Read, we always look at, what learnings do we have from our engagement with the field. It is clear that, we all know about the tools, whether the future readiness tools or the well-being tools, they will focus on, students on different life skill sets. But when it comes to the systems tools, it will also give us some insights on the system's appetite for life skills, for the policy provisions. It will give us some insights on the system's willingness, the perception, need, and the relevance of what is being done, how sustainable, what is going to be the momentum that is going to be generated, which will take it forward. I mean, we all have to create the momentum, but there has to be an inherent spark in the product, in the tool itself, so that it can go forward and engage with many more people. So it has to have a life, it has to have a brain of its own, if I could put it that way. And let's say the system's preparedness, the structural and budgetary allocations, and what is more important, we figured out from our anecdotes, is that while you may look at your success indicators in terms of budgetary allocations, a government order, so many people trained, an assessment cell formed, the gender cell reactivated, and all of that. These are all formal indicators. Let me also tell you, the informal indicators of what tacit knowledge are you placing inside the government system is no less important. So this becomes a major area of engagement. I think that, we should look at very explicitly putting life skill in the forefront, but at the same time, put it through anything and everything possible and have a very strong gender equality component in it.
Got it. Thank you.
Over to you.
I will just request Arjun or Purvi, would you like to hand us the questions? Would you want me to take them directly from the chat?
Thanks, Samar. We only have 2 questions on the chat, and I'm happy for you to pick them there.
I'll do that.
We'll try and see, we've had some people on LinkedIn Live. We'll try and see if there are any questions there. We'll try and get them to you.
Sounds good. So I'll start with Sri Lakshmi's question first. And Dhanashree, maybe I'll address this to you because it's focused a lot on, how do you really show impact, like build evidence of a program. So I'll read out her specific question. When you do a program like, entrepreneurship, life skills, which are relatively new and at scale, you're partnering with the state government. How do you think about the monitoring and evaluation of these programs? How do you show the government the impact of the program? And, any thoughts, ideas would help.
Sure. So, Sri Lakshmi, thank you, and Samar, thanks for that question. I think the impact is measured at 2 or 3 different levels. One is if you've delivered life skills, which for a certain period of time, and depending on the competencies that you've delivered, you'll actually assess if the children have been equipped with those life skills or not. So that's really first level at the child level. If you provided inputs on problem solving, then have the scores improved, has the bar been raised, has the needle moved for problem solving, that's what you'd be after. And if those competencies have improved, then you'd assess both knowledge as well as their ability to apply those skills in a certain context. And that is how the evaluation assessment tools get designed. So that's at the level of the child. You also assess, the impact in their ecosystem, because children and their ability to apply some of these life skills is also determined by what is the environment in which they're operating within the school as well as within the family community. So there are some inputs that you provide to both parents. You work at the school level to address, let's say, activate the SMCs, because if there are no teachers, or if there is no toilet, or if there's a leaking roof, I cannot just sit and do a life skills session while ignoring the rest of it. So there is some level of ecosystem work you do. So you try to assess impact at the system level as well as the community stroke family level, if parental attitude to maybe sending girls to school or not has changed to some extent. And at the system level impact, you're also assessing to what extent there is readiness within the system to eventually take up life skills. So that's another level at which you're seeing are, let's say, the system level officials at the cluster level or the BU or the others visiting the school, trying to look at the sessions, participating in training programs, and sometimes they join some learning, sharing, orientation sessions themselves. So if that kind of engagement is actually happening, so there are indicators at the skill level, there are indicators at system readiness level, there are indicators on attitudes and practices for both children as well as parents, as well as the larger community. So I think it requires us to track impact at all of these levels. And at the system level, it would be great if one is able to even leave behind some of the more readily available tools for day-to-day monitoring. So for example, if they're using a school monitoring format, so tomorrow if some of the school system level officials are visiting schools and they witness a session, what do you want them to do with the school monitoring format? Include some indicators there. I mean, even before we get to a point where the system starts doing a life skills assessment as a whole, there are some footholds to do monitoring that is system led even now.
Thanks, Tanushree. And Srilakshmi, I'm not sure which organization you're from, but I would encourage you to just check out the LSE website. In fact, what as a group we're trying to do is make some of these tools available to the broader ecosystem. So both at a student level, what kind of change we could see in the skills that Tanushree was talking about, and at a system level, the readiness of the system, the capacity that teachers would have. We're trying to make a whole bunch of tools available where you could collect some of this data for your own program. I'll take up Mukesh's question next, which I think is a tough one. So I'm thinking maybe Shakti Prata or Monal, if one of you could answer this. He wants to know more specifically how life skills elements could be integrated into subject teaching practice, like language or math. I think Tanushree spoke a little bit about Mizoram's experience on using the social studies curriculum as one way to start that journey. But any examples that you would have seen in your work where these elements are getting integrated with language or math teaching?
Over to you, Monal, because, as Room to Read as an organization, we strongly believe that, implicitly ingrained life skills in a curricular domain is important, but it's important to have an explicit life skill instruction. So over to you, Monal.
Yeah, thank you. So I actually resonate with what Shakti is saying. I feel that both are required, integration too, and exclusively doing it too. Sometimes when you don't do something exclusively, then the focus doesn't remain, right? So from that angle, I actually completely resonate with what you are saying, Shakti. But also addressing what is being asked. This is a tough one for sure. But I think a couple of things that I have seen work in the work that we've been doing, and I could probably pick from there. although I'm not saying that, those are the best practices, but those seem to have worked at some point. So I think we have to recognize that in schools and in districts, special resources for things like life skills and social emotional learning are not necessarily there, right? I mean, we're still dealing with inadequate teachers even for subjects, for teaching subjects. So life skills के लिए special resource होना is going to be nearly impossible. But for me, that what I've learned is that is the opportunity by itself, because then, if I'm getting my language teachers, if I'm getting my maths teachers and all my teachers in general trained into something like this, and I want to go back to what I was talking about a while back, which is that life skills is about internalizing the concept or the practice. So build the teacher as a practitioners herself of life skills. And one of the a few years back we were doing a research, and we realized our finding was that most of us are trained in what is known as the 20th century format, where life skills was not necessarily very important. So which means that that integration and that internalization of these kind of things is absolutely essential. So again, that is my opportunity. So build the teachers as practitioners of life skills first of all, for their own self, and then slowly bring in this practice that, hey, now that you are yourself, say for example, practicing empathy, how are you going to look at how does this come into the practice in your classroom? And that is where the kind of conversation shifts, because in fact there is no need to even ask the teachers. Once they practice, they actually start taking it to their classroom. So that is one big element that I deeply believe that can work. The second thing that we've observed is that, and you were mentioning somewhere about state curriculum frameworks being developed basis the NEP 2020. And really consciously, how do we again, bring in those 10 minutes or 20 minutes of engagements in life skills within a particular lesson plan? So is there a way to integrate the lesson plan with life skills? I think that is our opportunity again, within the state curriculum framework. And then when the curriculum framework is translated into lesson plan, where is the integration? And the third thing that again I have seen that has worked is of course when the textbooks are revamping, but that's a long way to go as of now. But really, very consciously, like Shakti was talking about gender equity, and bringing in being very conscious of how those chapters are being written or rewritten, and ensuring that the minimum learning level that or the competency that the chapter is going to address is not just about, say, a language proficiency. Suppose if it is a language or language textbook, but also very consciously writing down in the chapter, this chapter will address this particular, say, a problem solving NAMCA life skill, and then consciously building the chapter in such a way that it is built in. So I think these are some of the great opportunities that I would say would work.
Yeah, fully resonate with you, Monal. I think in the regular subject teaching, in fact, there are probably many opportunities to integrate these skills. Like as you were talking, I was reflecting that, if you, even in your language class, like in English or Hindi, when you have to write an essay, that is communication, right? We don't think of it like that, but that is communication. When you have to work in a group for any group activity, that is collaboration, team building. And that's pretty much the way that many of these subjects are actually being taught. Like when you talk about math, you read a word problem or you're given a graph, you have to interpret data. I think many elements of those life skills, including analytical thinking, problem solving, critical thinking, are being brought to the fore and are probably being used also, but not very explicitly. So I felt what you said was very interesting, because there's a very unique opportunity for us to just integrate it in the lesson plan, so that even the teacher is more aware that, this is kind of going hand in hand with the subject matter of the content. And if you do it more holistically across the subjects and across, certain sets of grades, then you can also make sure that all the different skills are being covered. So, not every activity is only about communication or teamwork, but, we are giving students the exposure across, the 8 or 10 or 15 or whatever the framework tells us, across a wide variety of the skills. And there's some kind of a progression also that you could see across stages. So very interesting. And thanks for sharing that perspective. I
just wanted to add that what you said, Samar, I think also the fact that the balance that one is trying to keep here, and which is indeed the challenge, is that while you integrate that content, how do you keep the activity still experiential?
Yes.
So that what the child takes away continues to remain experiential and not, for want of a better word, textbookish. So that is literally the way to one can possibly crack. But just for the audience, since the question was asked, that NIOS had begun this to do with the English language content that they have, a National Open School, and integration of life skills in the English subject learning had been initiated. And that's because NIOS reaches out to so many children who are studying from the outside and not a part of the formal schooling systems. So I think it was a great opportunity, and that's also something to consider for out of school children, so to say, those who are out of formal schools. And that's a category that finds less opportunities to get exposed to life skills. So those are also some of the interventions that we want to consider going forward, because the school system still gets covered in one way or the other.
And I also wanted to, I guess, bring back Shakti Prata's point that, some of this can be integrated, but then there are topics which will require dedicated capacity, dedicated curriculum. And I think specifically when we're talking about like deeply entrenched social issues, when we talk about gender equity, it's not something, which could be addressed just very simply. So we will continue to, balance, like I think in every state, they will always have a balance across both of these approaches. I think we're almost out of time. So I just wanted to say a big thank you to Monal, Dhanashree, Shakti Prata for a very engaging conversation. I took lots of notes. And I hope, and as I said, I think in the beginning that I'm sure this is one of many discussions that we will all continue to have as a group, to really try and put some more specificity around how this becomes a reality in, the very large system of 260 million children that we have in school today. So thank you so much for your time and inputs, and also thank you to the participants for listening in. It was great to have you all here today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Samar. Thank you so much for anchoring it on behalf of the LSE as well. It was great that you moderated it. On behalf of the Life Skills Collaborative, I also want to take the opportunity of thanking our panelists and thanking Samar. And also all the other people who attended. So this has been a fantastic experience. And like Samar said, lots of notes taking, right from the NEP to how the task list is now making that mind shift happen to where the need of a full instructional curriculum, the complexity of multiple frameworks, and the need to simplify the approach to build government ownership, to build constant dialogue with the system. The assessment is being a key factor. Monal's point of recruiting the right people for the right job at every level. The need for evidence, as Dhanashree put it. I think there was some fantastic insights there that great takeaways. So thank you all very much. And thanks, Samar, for anchoring. Thank you, everyone. Have
Thank
a
you. Very
wonderful evening.
enriching. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.